This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carrol Massar and Tim Stenovec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good afternoon, Matt Miller here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, or is it the Bloomberg Business Week Studio? We renamed the studio for this program. Tim and Carrol are off. They're out at the, what is that Ritholtz conference called?
Future Proof.
The Future Proof conference. So they'll be joining our radio and YouTube audience in just about an hour's time. And of course, they'll be on the close with Romaine and...
Actually, the simulcast is not happening today.
Oh, no?
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of the whole show.
I know, me too, but they're hard at work in
wouldn't have canceled
Huntington
that.
Beach. But it's okay. 4 p.m. will still be great with me and Romaine.
There is a lot going on. Of course, at 4 p.m., you're going to get Oracle, so we'll be watching you for that. I always go to Romaine Bostic for all of my breaking earnings headlines. And then we got a lot coming up on this show today. Markets are up, right? We're looking at an S&P 500 that, if we closed right now, would be an all-time high.
It just needs to be cool for about 2 hours, and maybe we'll get that fresh all-time high. We do have a lot to get to, though. We got some interesting economic data, BLS revisions. We'll talk about that. Also, a big event happening in Cupertino right now. Yeah,
we have Apple with its most important product launches of the year. Ed Ludlow, of course, out there in Cupertino. He's been there all day. Ed, let's get a rundown from you now as to what we've been shown so far and what's to come.
We got what Bloomberg reported we'd get, which is 4 variants of the iPhone 17 generation. The red headline on the Bloomberg terminal was about the iPhone 17 Air. It is 5.6 millimeters in thickness. Bloomberg had reported it would be 5.5 millimeters in thickness, so I want to be transparent with the audience about that. Largely, the update and innovation is in the chips. Apple has done so much in-house on its CPU-GPU combination A19 Pro processor. That's how they've been able to make this thin phone. The why we care in that announcement is that we have seen Samsung enter that category, and what we don't yet know is the pricing on any of these models. And the way that I look at it, and I think, Matt, you and I talked about it on the show this morning, Apple is the world's 3rd most valuable company. It gets half of its sales from iPhone, and we are entering a key holiday sales season where we could see an upgrade cycle. So there's a lot at stake, but we are waiting on that critical piece because the politics and the global markets question is very much about how Apple prices this next generation handset.
Ed, when it comes to this very skinny phone, a lot of emphasis on just how thin this phone is. What are you giving up? Don't you compromise the camera quality in order to make it just so slim?
You nailed it. The camera on the A17, on the iPhone 17 Air, does not have the performance of the Pro variants, right? They talked about how the innovation was, like, if you think about how long and thin it is, they had to put a lot of components in the top of the phone. It was a surprise that it has Apple's most powerful processor, the A19 Pro, in it. They talked about it having really great battery life, but did not give us any numbers. And there will be a lot of skepticism of how much battery life has been sacrificed through the miniaturization process of getting a thin phone. But again, I go back to the competitive landscape. You know, Samsung had the Galaxy S25 Edge, and it came out earlier in the summer. In that case, Samsung did not raise prices and then pass them on to the consumer. So there's no precedent or suggestion that Apple will follow suit, but it's a very interesting open-ended question mark that will be answered probably in the next 20 minutes.
All right, Ed Ludlow, you're coming back later in the hour. That is Ed Ludlow out in Cupertino. He is the co-host of Bloomberg Tech covering that Apple event. It's interesting that they're compromising the camera because I have a husband, and he was an Android user for a long time. He switched to an iPhone in the last 3 years, specifically for the camera. That is a selling point for getting actually people to convert.
Yeah, for sure it is. But I have to say that the first time I bought a digital camera, and it was like the most expensive one on the market, it was all of 8 megapixels. Right? So we're in an age now where even a compromised iPhone camera is just as good or better than the best thing we could have gotten when I was at the height of my photography hobby.
But, time just marches on, and there's a lot of camera snobs
I'm the most excited for you,
Yeah.
actually, because
Why?
you still have like an iPhone 8, right?
I know. It's actually so dead. It's off on some man's desk over there charging, because it won't take a charger anymore. You have to have one of those special touch chargers, and I don't have one at work. In any case, there's a lot to get to when it comes to the economic front as well. Thankfully, sitting to my left, we have Bloomberg TV and Radio international economics and policy correspondent Mike McKee. Let's talk about that record downward revision that we saw for U.S. payrolls for the year through March, much bigger than had been anticipated.
I'm still sitting here shocked that you have a husband.
I do. His name is Joe.
Yeah, he has an iPhone.
Yeah.
I want to know from Ed, the only question I want to know is, do I want to buy this phone?
No.
Well, what are you talking about? The iPhone 17 in general, or the actual thin one, which only has a single 48 megapixel camera?
Yeah, in general. I mean,
I will say,
because this will be like consumer spending for Christmas. Maybe.
True, that's true. We were talking to Mark Gurman, our Apple correspondent, on the close yesterday, which I now anchor, and we asked him point blank, and he said no. People probably won't buy this phone.
Definitely. I mean, I think it depends on your cycle, right? I upgrade every 2 years, and right now this is time for me. Katie doesn't ever, so she's not going to. What about you, Mike?
I have a 15, so I guess a 2-year cycle would mean I'd be thinking about it.
You're on the hook.
We'll go down to the Apple store together and check that out. All right, jobs. We saw the revisions in the jobs report come in at 911,000 fewer jobs in March of this year. When you're looking at the total number of jobs in the United States at that point, which is about 0.6% less than had been noted before. So it's not a huge change. It's a bigger change than we normally see. It does suggest that the economy was weaker. Job creation was weaker during the year from April of 2024 to March of 2025. But it also doesn't tell us anything about what's going to happen going forward or where we are now. We don't have the data past March, so that we won't get till January payrolls report, which comes out in February. And so the Fed is just going to have to use whatever numbers we have here and their own, because they have their own things that they put together to decide what to do in September. So as I said earlier to Matt, this is kind of the most consequential, inconsequential data release that we've had.
Well, I actually heard Joe Matthew on Balance of Power talking to someone from the halls of Congress earlier. She was a Republican and was basically saying the skewed numbers were a conspiracy, a political conspiracy by the BLS to hurt the Trump administration. Does anybody who isn't a politician think that's the case?
Anybody who isn't a Republican politician? No. The people who work with statistics all the time, one good example, the National Association for Business Economics, 3,000 economists at companies all over the country, put out a statement yesterday defending the BLS and saying that the problem is people who are criticizing them don't understand any of this. They don't know how the numbers are put together. They don't know why the numbers are put together the way they are. There's probably somewhat economically and statistically illiterate. So they're just criticizing because it's politics. And that I would urge people who are concerned about any of this, which should be everybody, to do the research. And you can find out all of how they put this stuff together. It's all in the BLS releases. There's one criticism that's a little too nerdy, which that may be true. But all the data on how they do this, they make public. So it's not like they're hiding anything.
Yeah, well, feed it into a chat bot and it'll summarize it for you, or just read it yourself. Mike, I want to bring this conversation back to the Fed, because September aside, let's talk about last September. Actually, I've read some commentary that the fact that actually the labor market was so much weaker than we expected, that helps to justify why the Fed cut by 50 basis points last September.
Well, sure, you can backdate your justifications, but the Fed was seeing signs that the labor market was getting weaker. Jobless claims were going up, unemployment rose a little bit. They were starting to worry about the labor market, which is their proxy for how the economy is doing. And so they decided to go with 50 basis points. And now this just shows even more so that they were right to do that. But remember that the Trump campaign at the time said the president did this, said the Fed did this to aid President Biden, and it was a mistake to cut rates by that much. So, again, politics, as the late Will Rogers said, is applesauce.
I also always find it interesting that, and Katie is the one who pointed this out to me maybe a couple months ago, or reminded me that the last time the Fed was cutting rates, the 10-year yield went in the opposite direction. And the reason, of course, that the Trump administration, that Scott Bessent and co want the Fed to cut rates is so that Treasury yields come down, so that mortgages get cheaper. At least that's one of the reasons. Also, so they can pay less on the debt. But if rates go in the other direction, that's not really going to help much.
Yeah, well, the Fed controls the short end, 2 years and under. Those rates are generally pinned to where the Fed funds rate is. Once you get beyond that, particularly when you get to the top of the belly of the curve or the long end, you're talking about what investors think is going to happen to interest rates from the point of where the Fed funds rate is going out that time period. And they start to think if the economy is too strong or the Fed is too loose, that we're going to see inflation. And so they raise rates to compensate for that. So it's really a question of convincing not the Fed, but convincing the markets that interest rates are set at the right level.
All right, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Mike McKee, our international policy and economics correspondent. Of course, a lot of that jives with politics. Let's get over to Charlie Pellet right now. He's got your Bloomberg Business Flash. Charlie?
Hi, thank you very much, Matt Miller, Katie Greifeld. We do have stocks advancing. In fact, right now we are trading at the best level of the day on the S&P. A lot of moving parts, and we got you covered. Downward revisions to payrolls, geopolitical developments in Doha, and of course, Apple. Apple shares, a lot of news coming out of Cupertino. Apple down now by 1.3%. Right now, the S&P pushing higher by 12, 65.07, on track for a record close potentially, up 0.2%. The Dow up 0.5%, while Nasdaq higher now by 0.1%. The Mag 7 index, of which Apple is a part, trading higher by 0.5%. But to be clear, Apple down now by 1.5%. We've got the 10-year 4.06% with the 2-year 3.53%. Gold up 0.2%, 36.43 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.7%, 62.68 a barrel, as we keep an eye on geopolitical developments. And Bitcoin at 110,976 Bitcoin right now, down by just about 0.9%. Apple rolling out the first end-to-end update to its smartwatch line in 3 years, debuting upgraded Series 11, Ultra, and SE models. Also, we do have Microsoft ordering many employees back to work 3 days a week. Microsoft shares now, they are trading up by 0.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right. Thank you for that update, Charlie Pellet. Let's go now to France. We were discussing, of course, the turmoil underway in the French government yesterday. Now we have a new update. Macron appointing a new prime minister after the old one failed that confidence motion yesterday. We go now to Bloomberg News Paris bureau chief Alan Katz joining us from the Paris bureau. Alan, what do we know so far?
So as you mentioned, Macron put out a statement just a few minutes ago naming Lecornu as the new prime minister. But France, it seems, is finally learning a little bit how to manage coalition politics, because unlike normal times when the new prime minister is just told, he's named and then said he's going to form a new government that he would then present to the president for approval, this time he said that Lecornu is supposed to go out and have discussions with the different parties in Parliament, and there's several of them, and try to create agreements to be able to pass a budget and to pass other bills that might be needed later in the year. And then form a government. And that's very typical of how coalition politics works. If you look at Germany or the Netherlands or any other sort of parliamentary democracies, they tend to do that. The parties will come together, they'll have these coalition discussions, and after that, they'll form the government based on those coalition discussions. So that's where France is trying to head. We'll see if they actually get there. Again, this is not in France's usual sort of political history, so it's a new thing for France, but at least they're starting to learn after a year and 2 prime ministers who've been ousted in confidence and no confidence motions. They're trying to sort of learn a new way to do politics.
Yeah, this will be the 5th prime minister we've seen in 2 years. Bayrou was in for 8 months and change. Barnier was only there for 3 months. I almost feel like maybe you're wasting your time if you learn too much about Lecornu, because how much longer is he expected to last?
I mean, that's a good question. The answer is who knows. But your point about the short life of a prime minister since Macron called a parliamentary election a year ago is accurate, right? What happened from that parliamentary election is that you ended up with basically 3 blocs in parliament that are really at odds with each other, basically a left-wing bloc, a center bloc, and a far-right bloc. And that's resulted in a lot of political instability. Lecornu, who came originally from a party called the Republicans, which is sort of a center-right party, has been with Macron since Macron became president in 2017. Is he the person to sort of build bridges across these political parties? It's not immediately obvious. He's known as a skilled negotiator. He doesn't have a lot of enemies. He's been pretty good as a defense minister. So the answer is maybe. But I mean, honestly, Bayrou, the guy who was just lost that confidence motion, he was known as a good negotiator as well. And Michel Barnier, the one before him, was famous within the EU for negotiating the deal with the UK for Brexit. So there are always these skilled negotiators, and yet the last 2 at least have failed. So, I mean, your point's well taken. Will Lecornu last? That's really remains to be seen. And I would say the odds don't look great given the past history, but you never know.
Alan, put into perspective for U.S. listeners who notoriously don't have passports or travel, how important France is, especially in the context of the European defense, which, the American president claims we've paid for all of it, but surely the French are one of the main players in protecting the continent from Russia.
So in terms of European defense, France is definitely the biggest and strongest player. Since Charles de Gaulle was president back 50 years ago plus, France has decided that it needed to be independent of the United States in terms of its defense. It created its own nuclear defense system. It's the only country that has fighter jets that are not in any way dependent on the U.S., plus nuclear weapons that are not in any way dependent on U.S. supplies. And so it is a big player in European defense. That said, the U.S. is really dominant in defense of the European continent. I mean, it's been an issue for a series of administrations in the United States, claiming that Europe essentially wasn't paying its way for NATO or for its overall defense. It became more acute after Russia's sort of full-on invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And France, and particularly President Macron, has been pushing for Europe to increase its defense spending and increase its defense capabilities for several years. He's gotten more people to listen to him after Trump came into office and really started, pushing back against NATO. But so it is very important. It does not replace the United States, though, certainly not for the moment. France is pushing to create a better defense system, or certainly a better funded defense system in Europe, but that's several years down the road, really.
All right, Alan, great to get some time with you. Really appreciate it. Alan Katz, there, our bureau chief in Paris, talking to us about the new prime minister in France. We'll go back to him in a few months when the next one is put in place. Right now, I want to get the latest on what's going on in the Middle East. Israel this morning claimed it had attacked Hamas leaders in Doha, so outside of Gaza. Hamas has since claimed that they haven't killed those leaders, that they were unsuccessful. Mona Yacoubian, director and senior advisor of the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, joins us on this attack. And Mona, the first question I have is, how unusual is it for the Israeli forces, for the IDF, to make this kind of attack outside of Israel and Lebanon?
This sort of a strike on Doha is really unprecedented by Israel. They've certainly undertaken covert assassination attempts and other things, but a military strike on Doha by Israel is unprecedented. And let's remember, Doha is a partner of the United States. It hosts the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, El Udeid Air Base. So we're really looking at something quite unprecedented.
Quite unprecedented. And I mean, to reiterate what Matt said, apparently the U.S. was informed before this was going to happen, though Israel made clear that they were acting alone. But what does this mean for the U.S. relationship with the Gulf states?
Well, it's interesting to look at the president's press secretary remarks this afternoon, where she really sort of went to great lengths to underscore the important role that Qatar plays from the perspective of the United States. So I think the U.S. is really trying to do some damage control here. But without a doubt, it's got to raise concerns in the minds not only of the Qataris, but all of the GCC states about the situation they find themselves in the Middle East today, where Israel seems to be, essentially acting with impunity, undertaking strikes where and how it decides it needs to, regardless of whether or not that country has a particularly strong relationship with the U.S., let alone actually hosting significant military installations. So I think this is a moment of great peril in the region.
So I guess Israel is allowed to act that way solely because of the support of the United States, right? At one point, you would have seen Europe behind, and Germany, of course, firmly behind Israel's military. But how much has that support eroded as the IDF continues to devastate Gaza and kill so many women and children in the territory?
Well, I think Israel is in an incredibly difficult position in the international community because of its conduct of the war in Gaza. We've seen a growing international outcry regarding conditions in Gaza. And now today we've also seen condemnation, for example, French President Macron condemning the Israeli action. I think increasingly there's just worry that these kinds of actions are really transgressing international norms, international law, and they're creating a far more dangerous Middle East with implications not just for the region, but certainly for U.S. security and frankly for Israel's security.
And I wonder what the end game is, Mona, because it feels like that's getting increasingly hard to see. Of course, we're coming up on another, milestone with October 7th, just about a month away here. And I mean, what do you think the path forward is here? Is it conceivable that we will see some material cooling down, or what are the steps that we need to see to get there?
I wish I had an answer for you about what the end game is, because honestly, I think this latest attack really defies logic. As you rightly note, the second year anniversary of October 7 is approaching, a horrific terrorist attack. But Israel's nowhere closer to resolving and addressing that conflict today than it was 2 years ago. There are Israeli hostages who remain in Gaza. And unfortunately, because of this strike, the Qataris have now suspended their role as mediator, and it feels as though the prospects for a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza are further away today than they've ever been.
Is there any chance that the Palestinians get back to a place where a two-state solution is possible, or is that just out the window at this point?
Well, one never wants to say things are out the window, but I think both Israelis and Palestinians are at a historic divide, and a two-state solution appears, further and further out on the horizon today. But that said, we can never discount the possibility of dramatic shifts and openings that are created in moments of crisis like the one we find ourselves in. I can't tell you what that looks like right now.
Right. What's the alternative, Mona? I mean, what happens to, we saw press reports today that the IDF was trying to evacuate 1 million people from Gaza City, and there are obviously many more across both Gaza and the West Bank. So where will those people go now that their homes have been completely and utterly destroyed?
Well, they're being forcibly evacuated into smaller and smaller areas of Gaza. And I think this is provoking concerns among Israel's neighbors, Egypt in particular, that this could lead to even expulsion into Egypt, which would be a huge red line. And so I think, unfortunately, in the absence of movement toward peace, the prospects are for deepening and more dangerous conflict.
All right, Mona, great to get some time with you. Really appreciate it. That is Mona Yacoubian. She is Director and Senior Advisor of the Middle East Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, joining us from Washington, D.C. We will, of course, continue to follow that story. But let's get on over to Charlie Pellet for an update on what's going on.
All right. I thank you very much, Katie. Apple introducing its iPhone 17 lineup. Shares down now by 1.3%. Oracle and Synopsys will be reporting after the bell. Jamie Dimon telling CNBC the U.S. economy is weakening. After that record BLS revision, stocks are recovering after the jobs revision boosts the chance of rate cuts. Here's where we stand in terms of the equity markets. S&P at a record 6509, up 14 now, up 0.2%. The Dow up 0.5. NASDAQ up 0.1%. We've got the 10-year yielding 4.07%. Gold up 0.2%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.7%, 62.66 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks so much for that. Charlie Pellet there with your Bloomberg Business Flash. The big corporate story of the day certainly has been Apple, as it is every year with these product launches. We all wait with bated breath to see what they give us out of Cupertino, California, even though Katie never upgrades her iPhone. Most people do every couple of years. I think maybe most people do it even more often.
They just love spending money, don't they?
Than every couple of years. Well, they want the newest and the latest and the greatest. And it's not just about iPhones. There is a new watch. There are new AirPods, which actually can give you your heartbeat.
Yeah, and maybe translate things too.
In real time. Let's get over to Ed Ludlow. He's there in Cupertino with the details. Ed, what to you is the most exciting product launch? I know the stock jumped on those on the AirPods with the heartbeat news.
Yeah, it did. But I mean, the major development since last we spoke is pricing on iPhone 17 generation, right? As we discussed all day long, typically iPhone reveal days are a sell the news moment. The stock fell to a 1.6% decline. I think it might have paired some of that decline when we got pricing. And the reason that that's critically important is what you've just discussed. Do consumers go out and drive a massive upgrade cycle? But also that would be news if Apple were to have substantially or substantively raised the prices. The base model is $799. The Air, the thin variant, is $999. Then the Pro is $1099. The Pro is an effective price raise generation to generation, but its storage is double the prior generation, so you get more for your money. So now the question, there's one factor you guys don't talk about. I find this so interesting, whether or not you upgrade. It's a question for the US consumer in particular. What happens if your carrier, be it T-Mobile or AT&T or another, says to you, give us your iPhone 15 or your iPhone 16 and we'll give you the 17 generation for free? What would both of you do then? Because that's the story that's going to happen next.
I would say yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly so.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
exactly.
I want to know who would say no, honestly, Ed.
Right, but in the environment that we're in, right, where Apple is a $3.5 trillion company, the third most valuable company in the world that is under immense political pressure from this administration, we know that costs are higher, supply chain costs, component costs, assembly costs. They've chosen this pricing arrangement. And then they have to make a deal with the carriers. And the carriers then have to incentivize the consumer. And there's something that's really fascinating about this. Maybe it's fascinating to me. Maybe I'm a nerd. All the sell-siders listening to this will say, thank you, Ed, we get it. We're within the current fiscal quarter. Look at the dates that the phones come out. Within the fiscal quarter, then do the math on the next fiscal quarter in the holiday period. And so there's a lot of calculus to be done. But that's the news, and as is always typical on a day like today, it was a sell the news moment. And Matt, you and I did that chart this morning, did we not? That look 30 days, 60 days out, past an iPhone launch event historically, the stock does tend to rally. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Sure. Well, if you look at it past a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, it rallies too.
Well, stocks only go up. Yeah.
You know, I think, to me, the iPhone and the pricing and that kind of thing is interesting if you're an analyst, but it's really incremental. That's just a grind, right? What I'm waiting for is the breakthrough. What I'm waiting for is the innovation. What I'm waiting for is making the world a better place. So to me, heartbeat monitor in AirPods is very cool. And then my next question, of course, is when does Siri get smart? When does Siri become like half the person ChatGPT is? So
on the tick by tick on the stock, it was a surprise that in the opening exchanges of the keynote, the stock went from a decline of, say, 0.7% to positive territory on AirPods Pro that have simultaneous translation. That answers a part of your question on when Siri gets smart, because look at the work that Meta is doing with the glasses and that some of the other OEMs, like Google even, have done. There is a heavy emphasis in this AI age on simultaneous translation. And when that news came up, it wasn't just that Apple stock reversed direction. Duolingo shares, and Katie, I know you have a relationship with that CEO, right?
I do. I know him well.
The shares of Duolingo moved markedly. You know, and that isn't that astonishing sign from the market that they look at the software announcement here. You've got the AirPods Pro, it's a piece of hardware, but it can now do something, simultaneous translation, it couldn't do before, and the market reacted accordingly. And again, Matt, on the heart rate sensing technology, working out wearing AirPods, the market didn't react in the moment in the sense that, you know, I didn't see any other health tech gear makers move necessarily, but remember that like some of this was in the Bloomberg reporting prior and was baked in, and you've seen some of those rivals in the market come out with new tech in anticipation of what Apple might do.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Duolingo. Shares now flat, but they did initially drop more than 5% when that news came out. So definitely a moment there for Duolingo. Apple shares now selling on the news, like you said, down more than 1%. Ed, though, when it comes to the carriers, I know that you have a conversation coming up with the COO of AT&T that's happening on the close. I will be watching with bated breath.
Wait, do you anchor that show?
I do. I anchor that show now with Babe Bostic. Well, it's 3 to 5 every single day.
Every day on live internationally broadcast television.
Indeed. Ed, talk to us about some of the questions you have there for the carriers specifically.
One small correction. It's the COO of T-Mobile.
You know, I knew there was a T in there.
The same question applies.
TMUS.
There you go.
It's okay. Also, just like astonishing news day in the markets. Like there's so much going on in geopolitics and the macro. Like I don't know how you guys do it. I just have to focus on Apple. But that's the only question for the carriers. What is the deal? Like when I get the marketing email on my phone, or you walk into a high street in any American city, what is it you're going to offer the consumer to get them to actually buy the iPhone 17 generation? And then beyond that, like this seems dry, or the grind, as Matt might call it, and did a second ago. But like, how does T-Mobile negotiate in advance how many handsets it's going to take? Take too much inventory and no one buys it, you're in trouble. Take too little and then consumers get upset because they have to wait for the handset. I find all of that fascinating. Like, it's hard running any company, but I like the idea that T-Mobile and Apple have been negotiating this for months, and so we can get a little insight into that.
What I find most exciting around T-Mobile, Ed, is something that we talked about with you yesterday, and obviously you had on your program, Bloomberg Tech. Ed is the co-anchor of Bloomberg Tech every day from 11
I like that we're spelling this all out for the audience.
The fact that SpaceX, like, not only spent $17 billion on spectrum, but also $8.5 billion in its own, you know, private market shares to get this spectrum, and can break off from a partner like T-Mobile, right? And really can offer a challenge to Telephone and Verizon as well. I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah, if we just park for 1 second the debate about whether one needs to have satellite connectivity on their mobile phone, it is a more nascent technology where initially Starlink and T-Mobile partnered and ran a beta. I participated in the beta, and where you don't have any cellular connection, in limited communications, messages, calls, it works well. the satellite connectivity. But you're absolutely right. In buying those two specific spectrum frequencies, Starlink could now stand on its own 2 free. I will ask the T-Mobile COO about that. Bringing it to the news today here in Cupertino, Apple on its high-end watch announced satellite connectivity. That puts it in competition with the very high-end health or smartwatches that Garmin does, for example. Because if you're like an ultra-marathon runner or like a hardcore Ironman person, or you love to scale the side of a mountain like Tom Cruise out of Mission Impossible, maybe you need a smart or watch that is satellite connected. I don't know, but that's the logic. And again, like, the market does pay attention to those kinds of capabilities when Apple encroaches on the domain that others have been in for a longer period of time.
All right, Ed, great update. We'll be hearing from you throughout the rest of the Bloomberg day, including on the close, which comes up at 3 p.m., which I anchor now with Romaine Bostick. That is Ed Ludlow, the co-host of BTech, joining us from Cupertino. Meanwhile, let's check in on these markets. The S&P 500 higher right now to the tune of about 0.2%, even though you do have Apple lower on the day, now down by 1.6%, Matt. That is your biggest points contributor to the downside right now.
Yeah, the markets I find pretty fascinating in that, well, on the equity side, good, we're at an all-time high, or we will be if we close at this level. That's also kind of an incremental move up just to grind higher. What I find crazy is the yields.
Yes.
Like the 10-year yield, I guess I slept through that. It was 425, 430, and all of a sudden we're down at like 407. This morning we were at 404.
Yesterday it did look like we could crack 4%. We're moving higher today, which I also think is interesting because we had some pretty nasty revisions from the BLS this morning, but for some reason the answer is to trade bonds. But we will continue to track these markets. Don't go anywhere. This is Bloomberg Businessweek.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We've got the S&P and NASDAQ both trading at records right now. Equities higher as traders bet that a downward revision to past jobs numbers boosts the chances of accelerated rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. S&P right now up 11 at 65.06, a gain there of 0.2%. The old closing high 65.02. We've got the Dow up 234 now, up 0.5. NASDAQ higher by 21, trading at a record up 0.1%. The Bloomberg Mag 7 index up 0.4%. Notable declining stock in that index. Apple unveiling all those new products, down now by 1.5%. 10-year 4.07% with a 2-year 3.54%. Gold up $6 the ounce, now up 0.2%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.7, 62.69 a barrel. Goldman Sachs has won a $40 billion mandate from Shell to oversee pension assets. Goldman Sachs shares, they're up 3.1%. Shell up now by 0.9%. An American Express says it grew its global merchant acceptance rate by more than 16% in the 12 months through June. Shares of American Express down 0.2%. Recapping, stocks higher. Oracle, Synopsys, both coming up after the close of trading. S&P right now up by 0.2%. We are at a record. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks very much. Charlie Pellet there with the Bloomberg Business Flash on a day when the market is slightly higher, grinding just a bit more. It seems like each day, although it couldn't be because then we'd have a record every day. I think Thursday was 65.02.
Certain weeks it feels close to having a record every single day.
You're on the close now, so you must remember every day the closing levels.
Yeah, it is really interesting. It was interesting being on open interest, and the markets would open one way and then they would close a completely different way. So everything we said in the morning felt a little bit stale, but now you're right. I watch the markets close every single day. And
one of the success stories globally we're going to talk to right now, MercadoLibre is basically the Amazon of South America. The stock is more than doubled in the past 5 years, up 125%. And the CFO joins us right now out of Latin America, Martin de los Santos. And Martin, I've spoken to you a couple of times in the past few months. Give us an update on how your business is doing, how your growth is looking right now, and how the economy feels to you.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here. We announced results a couple of months ago for Q2, which shown very strong growth both on our e-commerce platform as well as our fintech business. Number of users growing very nicely, at 30% on fintech, 25% year-on-year growth on commerce, performing very, very well in all of the markets where we operate. We continue to increase financial inclusion. But then when we look at ahead, we see plenty of growth in the future, right? Penetration of e-commerce in Latin America continues to be relatively low compared to the US or Asia. It's at mid-teen %. Financial inclusion is very, very low, and we're also making significant progress on bringing people to our ecosystem. So we are very excited, not only with the results that we deliver in Q2, but with more importantly, with the growth that we see ahead of us.
I will say normally, so Martin, I know normally you're in Montevideo, but right now you're in San Francisco, just to correct myself.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit, Martin, about why you are in San Francisco.
We are attending the Goldman Sachs Technology Conference. So we're visiting with investors and analysts, and again, talking about the results and the future of the company.
And to that point, I mean, this is a technology conference. How are investors globally thinking about the Latin American tech scene? What are some of the conversations that you're having on the ground there?
Yeah, obviously they're looking at growth, the opportunity that we have on fintech, the new launches that we have done recently. On the fintech side, we announced the launching of the new credit card in Argentina. We are doubling our credit book year on year in this quarter. We are doubling the number, the amount of the funds investing on our platform. On the commerce side, we are at record levels in terms of growth. We continue to increase market shares on all of the markets where we operate. We're increasing our free shipping offering. So a lot of new things happening on our ecosystem, and those are the type of things that we're discussing with investors.
Poonam Goyal, our Bloomberg intelligence analyst who watches your business, wants to know about the acquisition of Globo Brazilian drugstore and how we should interpret that acquisition, what you're going to do with it, what's your strategy?
Yeah, I think when you look at the pharma category, it's a category that is very low, with very low penetration of e-commerce, but it's a large category within commerce in general, with a lot of frequency of purchase. So we are experimenting not only in Brazil, but in each country where we operate. We have a small pilots on pharma. It's a complex segment of a market because it's highly regulated, but we think it generates a big opportunity going forward. So it's not a lot to report right now. We just acquired in Brazil a small pharmacy to start to experiment. It's a very small part of our business, but it has a big potential because of the size of the commerce that is done on pharma.
Well, talk to us more broadly about how you're thinking about M&A right now. You made this purchase, of course, at the end of August. Should we expect to see more purchases from you?
No, we historically have been, we have performed very few acquisitions. For the most part, we like to build what we do, and we have done so. We have built our full fulfillment infrastructure on our own instead of acquiring. We have built our fintech solutions throughout the years on our own. We have 18,000 developers that are focusing on building the product at MercadoLibre and Mercado Pago. So I would say that for the most part, we are not an acquisitive company.
What about the pharma side of the business? I mean, do you see a lot of growth there? It's something that Amazon has recently gone into here. How many of your customers are getting their drugs from you now or online now compared to what you expect in, say, 5 years?
I think if you look at the pharmacy as percentage of sales at MercadoLibre, is negligible. It's almost non-existent today. So it's more of an opportunity going forward than a reality today. As I mentioned, we operate in 18 different countries. Each country has a different regulation for pharma. So I think it's more of an opportunity than a reality today. But like pharma, there are many different bets that we're doing throughout the operation. Supermarket, 1P, we're experimenting with food delivery that are small today, but represent large opportunities going forward.
By the way, Martin, can you watch what Amazon does? And, do you have time to watch them, wait and see how it works out for them, and then do it yourself? Or do you like to make your own innovative moves, make moves at the same time? How does that work?
I think obviously we observe when we analyze everything around the world, obviously the US, but a lot what's happening in China. And we try to bring those things to Latin America, but those require adaptation, right? I mean, in the early days when we started MercadoLibre 25 years ago, we used to be very similar to eBay, but we rapidly realized that we needed to adjust the model, and we move away from that, the auction model, for instance. Then we build our infrastructure in the same way as Amazon has it in the US. Our fintech solution looks a lot more what the Chinese have in China because of financial inclusion that we needed to make. So I think we do observe a lot what's happening in the world, but then we need to customize it to Latin America, which has a very different environment.
Well, it feels like Amazon is the elephant in every room, just about. And on the topic of Amazon, they recently bought a stake in a Latin American delivery startup, Rappi, I believe it's pronounced. It's a Colombian delivery company. What does this potentially mean for you? What did you make of that news?
I think we've been competing with Amazon for many years in Brazil and obviously more intensely in Mexico. And again, as I mentioned before, we have built our logistic infrastructure and our payment infrastructure to compete with Amazon, with the Asian players, and we will continue to compete with them based on the strength of our ecosystem. So again, it doesn't change the trajectory of our investments or our strategy. Not much to report on that front.
What's your investment strategy in terms of AI or data centers? Are you pouring, like all of the mega cap tech companies over here, billions of dollars into that?
No, we're not. I think regarding AI, I would break it down in three. There are certain initiatives that are helping us with cost savings. There are certain ones that are consumer facing and are helping us to push growth and improve the user experience and conversion. And then there are certain ones that speak more about the agentic AI in the way we interact with our users. I would say that we're making a lot of progress in terms of cost savings in many different areas of the business, in particular in coding. The 18,000 developers that we have are embracing AI and becoming more productive. Also consumer facing, a lot of the ways that the users interact with our platform have been improving because of AI. And then on the agentic AI, we're experimenting a lot. I think on that front, we have more questions than answers yet, but we have a large team of people who are looking at ways we can improve the user experience via developing our own agents.
All right, Martin.
But we are investing on fundamental models.
All right, that's a good place to leave it. Martin, it's really great to get some time with you. That is Martin de los Santos. He is the Chief Financial Officer of MercadoLibre. Meanwhile, you are listening and watching to Bloomberg Businessweek. Katie Greifeld and Matt Miller filling in for Tim Stenovec and Carrol Massar. They are out on the shores of California in Huntington Beach at the Future Proof Conference. But good news, they join us now. So Tim and Carrol, day one is done. What's on tap for day two?
Well, sitting right before us is a husband and wife team that actually are helping other couples, other individuals with their financial planning. We're talking about Heather and Doug Bonaparte. I want to find out about these quarterly check-ins that couples are doing and why they are doing it. They've also got a new book coming up. It's called Money Together. So, we're going to talk about financial planning. Guys, when you're talking with your spouses or significant other about finances, it can be a little tricky.
Yeah, well, according to this couple, it's actually the #1 cause for divorce or money concerns. So we're going to talk to them about that and more. Also, Jennifer Grancio is going to be joining us of TCW, formerly of Engine #1. You know her from her firm's fight against ExxonMobil years ago. She's standing by, and she's going to speak with us a little bit about the markets. And later, we got a couple big names joining us, especially one with technology.
Yeah, Dan Ives, you guys know him of Wedbush. We're going to talk maybe a little Apple, you think? I know you guys have talked about it a lot. We've certainly seen a lot of news out of it. They're big news in terms of some of their product announcements, stock movement off of it. So we'll see what he has to say. But I also am curious about AI is a big theme, a future-proof this year. So we'll see what Dan is kind of taking away from some of the conversations he's having when it comes to AI and the financial community.
Also, at the end of our program, Daniel Crosby is going to join us. He's Chief Behavioral Officer over at Orion Advisors. So he's going to stop by and talk a little behavioral finance. But we're having a good time over here. We appreciate you guys holding down the fort back in the Business Week studio.
Don't mess anything up, okay?
Yeah.
Dan Ives has launched a
he's here.
Bitcoin treasury company. Dude, it was up 5,000%
it's not Bitcoin. It's not
yesterday.
Bitcoin.
It's not Bitcoin.
Okay, I'm just saying, of the things you're going to talk to Dan Ives about, I think the 5,000% gain in the stock of the company that he's working with yesterday should be at the top of your list.
I will say he's also launched
also at the top of our list with him. Okay.
Okay, that should be at the top of the list.
No, also at the top of the list is his ETF. It launched back in June. IVES is the ticker. It's up 16% since then. It's outperformed the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100 considerably over that time. So he's got his hands in a lot of places right now.
All right, very cool. I look forward to watching, really listening to your show. As you know, I tune in to Carrol and Tim every day on Bloomberg Radio. By the way, that 8Co Holdings is the name of the Dan Ives vehicle that jumped yesterday at the close of trading. And the ticker, by the way, is OCTO, so Octo.
So just to wrap up, so he's got a clothing line, he's got an ETF, and he's got a crypto treasury company.
He's a man with a plan, or many plans. At the close, that stock was up 3,009%.
Not bad. Wouldn't say no to that.
All right, Katie, you're going to run off
and right now.
Anchor the close with Romain Bostic. He's going to be very angry if you take any longer to get over there. We will watch your program as well. Meanwhile, here in the studio, I am joined by Norah Mulinda. We want to take a look at some of the stocks on the move today, and Norah Mulinda joins us. She's an equities reporter on the BN side, but I'm sure you know her from this show and many others, where she helps out so much. Norah, I guess Apple is one of the main stocks that we're watching today, the biggest corporate news story. What are we seeing there?
Definitely. I mean, I'm looking at shares of Apple. They're down about 1.7% right now in trading. But of course, we know the biggest news of the day is the debut of the iPhone 17 lineup. How do we already make it to 17, Matt? Which iPhone do you have?
I have, I think, the 15. So I try and upgrade every 2 years, or at least that's
you see my assumption that you had an Apple product. You could have had an Android.
Yes. Well, no, I'm a normal human being. So
well,
I'm not one of those people who shuns the Apple ecosystem and prefers to use
to be alternative,
What do the other people use? Unix or something?
I have no idea what they're doing on that side, but we do have the debut, and of course that's really what's been in focus today. And apparently it has a skinnier Air model here, and of course we know that we always see the updates, the camera technology, and all this sort. But we are seeing shares sliding just a tad today. But I do want to move to some of the names in the green that I am keeping an eye on. Let's look at shares of Nebby. It says ticker NBIS. Some of these names is so interesting. I kind of had to do a deep dive into them, but this company is in focus, up as much as 54% today. So it's really, really charging higher here. And that's after Novartis agreed to buy the company. Sorry, that's actually the second one, but I want to go back to Nebius here. And essentially, this is an AI software company, but we do
Nebius, the ticker is NBIS.
NBIS, yes.
And this is a company a lot of people had never heard of.
See, that's what I'm saying. I had to do my research, so here I am mixing it up with another one.
But it is essentially the new Yandex, right?
Apparently so. Yeah. And so, I mean, of course, the focus today is the deal that they had with Microsoft. And this is the fact that they have a deal that's worth at least $17.4 billion, but could be as much as $19.4 billion. And we were seeing other companies that were also rallying after the news, because essentially people have this bet that, hey, if they're getting a deal with Microsoft, maybe some of the other ones can too, like CoreWeave, TeraWulf. So we are seeing a broad-based rally here. But let's move back over to Tourmaline. That's ticker TRML, the one that I was speaking about before. We're seeing another deal here. So Novartis is hoping to buy, or they are buying, U.S. biotech company Tourmaline, one I had to dig into as well. It's about $1.2 billion. So it's a small biotech company. But if you look at the moves that it's making today, it's up 58%. So really, really on a tear here. Looking at shares year to date, up as much as 134% so far this year. So, I mean, these are some small biotech companies, but lots of activity going on there.
Tourmaline, TRML, the ticker there. TECK is the ticker for Tech Resources, based out of Canada, trades here. What's the story with this miner?
Well, this is the story. It's actually...
And smelter, I should say.
Absolutely. So this
smelter
is a really big deal here. It's one of the biggest mining deals that we're seeing in over a decade here. We're seeing shares of Tech Resources, ticker TECK, seeing their best day since April here. Shares are up as much as 18% in trading, but essentially Anglo American agreed that they would buy the Canadian miner, and we're really seeing a lot of the street kind of rallying behind this. A lot of optimism right now, but this will actually create a company of worth more than $50 billion here, Matt.
All right, one of the biggest mining combinations in over a decade. Norah Mulinda, thanks very much for that. For more conversations like this, listen to our new Stock Movers podcast. Subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Listen to Stock Movers on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. By the way, that Stock Movers podcast is incredibly successful.
Oh, yeah.
It's a shock to me, though.
People want to know about the individual names.
Yeah, I know, but I don't ever download a podcast if I see it's only 5 minutes long. Like, if I'm going to go that far,
it's just that good.
I need a half hour. I need an hour. I have a real drive. You know, I'm not commuting across
maybe
town.
they're running it back to back. You never know. Maybe they're listening episode to episode.
Well, I think the key is people listen to them all day long because they change every hour,
exactly.
Right? So it's not the same thing throughout the day. But in terms of the stock market, you cover it for us on the BN side of the building here. We just seem to be eking out record gain after or record high after record high.
Absolutely.
What is this?
I mean, it's an interesting year, right? I mean, if you think about all that we've really seen this past year, from tariff concerns to the geopolitical instability here, it's interesting when you compare that to the 2 years prior. What we saw gains of more than 20%, and people thought that we would see a massive pullback this year, but we are still seeing some momentum. I mean, the S&P 500 is clearly up year to date. So, I mean, I think that it seems as though the street, they still feel optimistic even amid all the uncertainty.
Yeah, uncertainty. Tariffs, wars, all that stuff. Norah, thanks very much for that. If you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on radio, Bloomberg Businessweek Daily continues from Future Proof in Huntington Beach, California with Carrol, Massar, and Tim Stenovec. If you're watching Bloomberg Television, The Close is up next.